cease from exploration. And the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We like this quote, and the people in the Qual community, we like this quote a lot because can you still see the, no. Yeah. Because actually a lot of what we do in doing research, whichever paradigm or approach you take, it's actually going back to places we took for granted and actually learning about them again. That a lot of you intend to conduct your research in schools, in the schools you teach, in the places you work, and that you may choose those places because, oh, I know the place, or that's where I work. It's a place that is familiar. But part of doing research is turning what's familiar into something unfamiliar. It's taking what I think I know and realizing I don't know. It's looking at places we walk and we move around and starting to look at things again. It's interrogating the places where we are and start asking questions on questions like, how often do I notice what's in front of me? I mean, when you think about your schools, think about the places and think about all the things you never pay attention to. Start thinking about it right now. I'm just doing stream of consciousness here right now in this. Think about it. Think about in your schools, how many places do you never pay attention to when you're in your school? And I can give you one example, one of my favorite examples. Again, because I'm part of doing research in qualitative research, I do literacy. So I do a lot of the work that you're gonna be learning when you take the class with Dr. Jerez. I also do that kind of work. And as a literacy scholar, one of my favorite things is to notice what people read and people don't read. And one of my favorite things, I think, and I realized I was a literacy scholar once I started reflecting once I stood for 10 minutes in front of an elevator. Because in front of the elevator, there was a bulletin board with, with messages and announcements and advertisements and what have you. And I just stood there for 10 minutes, just looking at how many people actually stopped to read the bulletin board. And in 10 minutes, the amount of people who left the elevator and stood to look at the bulletin board was 0. So I was like, this is interesting. We don't read what's in front of us. How often do we read what's in front of us? How often do we read the things in our neighborhoods, the things in our classrooms? How often do we read? How often do you read what's posted on bulletin boards in your schools, for example? How often do you do that? You don't have to answer the question. I'm just giving you some thought-provoking stuff about the meaning of this exploration and about the meaning of doing research, because let's begin to start asking questions about things we thought we knew and about things we took for granted, because a lot of the things what happens in schools, we take it for granted until we start doing research. And then we realize how little we know about our schools, how little we know about our neighborhoods, how little we know about our students, how little we know about ourselves. And that is the first point right here. So this notion that doing research is about opening your mind to start exploring the things you took for granted or you thought were obvious or you thought you knew. And then you're gonna realize that you're gonna rediscover them and you're gonna relearn those places from a new perspective, a broader perspective. So that's the first thought. It's a thought from a cool guy. You may have heard his name at some point. Some dude from Brazil. His name is Paulo Freire. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Freire. So I always like to use this when I teach research, because this, for me, it's part of the ethos of a research course. This is part of the ethos of a research course. I like the quote, once again, there is no such thing as teaching without research and research without teaching. One inhabits the body of the other. I continue to search and research, search again. That's what doing research is. It's searching again. It's also searching what I don't know, but it's searching one more time. I teach because I search, because I question, and because I submit myself to questioning. I research because I notice things, take cognizance of them. And in so doing, I intervene. In intervening, I educate and educate myself. I do research so as to know what I do not know yet and to communicate and proclaim what I discover. So let's take one moment to analyze this. That one of the reasons we take a research class, and I want to be very clear that it's not simply to do research. Recently, I've been conceptualizing an idea of that there are three moments of doing research, or research in general. One is what I like to call research as doing, which is the act of conducting research studies. In the sense of I do research because I want to, develop a project, or I want to be more formalized structured research at the higher education level. Then I like to think of something that is, or I like to call research as reading. Research as reading. So getting into the culture that we read the research out there, that we take our time to go to all these wonderful peer-reviewed open access journals that are around the world, all these peer-reviewed open access journals we have in our field of language education all over the continent. And in the syllabus, you have a long list of journals from all regions, from Mexico all the way to Argentina. And then there is the third moment I like to call research as using. So when we learn about research, also to consume research, to read research, and to use that research in our class. So that when you go to your class and you teach, you want to develop a reading technique with your students, that is the result of looking at articles that talk about best practices in reading. That if you want to develop a writer's workshop or a way to develop writing with your students, you don't just go and look at what the research on writing studies has said are good practices. That when you look, for example, at the new ways to play with technology, I actually had the chance to read Dr. Jerez's syllabus out of curiosity. And when she talks, for example, when she's going to talk about, for example, this idea of how to rethink how we read online, how we reread text on a screen, that is something that you're going to use the research, the excellent research in the field, to inform your teaching. One of the goals of taking a research class like this, it's not simply, and please don't think about this just as, oh, this is a class I need to take in order to write a thesis. That is my invitation. Don't. Think bigger than that. I mean, yes, the assignments are all about the thesis. I mean, there is no denying. Of course they are. That is the centerpiece of the master's program, writing a thesis. But you need to think that you're doing a master's, and I want to leave that question in the air. It's not an easy question. It's a question that someone I already told you is a very special person in my education asked us one in a class. Why are you doing this program? So I want you to start thinking for a second, why are you doing this master's? Again, questions you don't have to answer. But they're not rhetorical questions. I just don't want you to start saying answers right now. You just think, why are you doing this master's? Are you just doing this because it's a requirement to get a promotion? I mean, yes, you may be doing the master's as part, that could be part of it. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe I want to do the master's because I'm thinking down the road, I'm insane enough to go for the Ph.D. Well, that's another good reason. But I want you to think bigger, to think broader than that. The bigger picture here is, why are we doing this master's? What can we do with the master's that we cannot do without it? Who can we help by having the master's that we cannot help by not having it? What kinds of advocacy can I engage in with a master's in the schools that I can't without the master's? So those are some of the questions about why you're doing this. And once you find that reason, a lot of the things that you're going to be doing in the classes and in the research and the proposal and the thesis, it's gonna find a bigger meaning, and it's going to make more sense. I mean, so it's important to think about the bigger picture. I mean, again, as Freire is inviting us, what is the bigger picture here in order to do this? Why are we doing this research? Why are we doing the masters? Why do I want to do that particular research project that I wrote in that first thing? I mean, they sent me a list, and then we have to talk in a second. We're going to start now talking a little bit about the research paradigms and the options you have, and then we'll talk a little bit more about qualitative research. If you had any chance to read through chapter 1 by Leavy, Patricia does a really interesting work explaining some of the purposes we have for research studies. And you have multiple options, and that's important to consider. And those multiple options, they have options, whether you want to say it's a qualitative study, a mixed methods, or you want to be more specific. And we'll talk about that throughout this course. One of the goals of your study could be to explore a phenomenon, to explore in detail. And that, for example, could lead into case studies, into ethnography, a critical literature review, or you can do a descriptive study where you just take some time to try to understand, try to give us as much detail about the phenomenon. And in a descriptive study, sometimes I want to stop for a second here, because sometimes we have this feeling that, and by the way, I'm going to share this presentation. I'll upload it to the Google Drive space. But if you're going to take a picture, let me just get right there. You can take a picture. There you go. Sorry, I'm too much. So a descriptive study is important, and the point I was trying to go into is that I sometimes, and I was having this conversation with Paulina over breakfast or lunch, that sometimes I see a lot of emphasis on, oh, we have to do an intervention, or we have to do an implementation. Like, okay, what does implementing something mean? What does intervening? First of all, as Renee, my first advisor, said, all research is an intervention. Research is an intervention. So the notion of intervention, as in I have to do something, to change the culture, like wait. Sometimes that doesn't have to be the goal. Sometimes the goal of a research project could be to help us understand the phenomenon, to help us figure out what it looks like. I mean, there is one thing I see people doing as part of a research study, and something is called a needs analysis. And I see people doing needs analyses as the introductory part of a project. But I think, listen, just determining a needs analysis is a study. A carefully conducted needs analysis can be a thesis, where you kind of, in the sense of, yeah, I want my students to engage with the use of technology, blah, blah, blah. Okay, first of all, do we know what the situation is in terms of technology? Do we know the conditions of the community in terms of technology, of access, connectivity? Do we know that before we start going crazy into throwing computers and tablets into this whole thing? Sometimes I feel like, no, we always, and I keep telling students, like, this is a time to, let's use the pandemic as a moment to slow down a little bit, to slow down and chill out and rethink what we're doing as researchers. And rethink if we need to do field work. I mean, even the question, do we even need to do field work? Do we need first to understand the problem? A descriptive study will do that. So instead of saying, I'm gonna go and start doing workshops and lesson plans, and maybe I should just talk to the students and to understand what's going on in their heads. Maybe that's a study. Let me just talk to the students, I mean, for a change, and listen to them. And listen to their voices about telling me what the problem is, and understanding it deeply enough that I can do the implementations, interventions, evaluations, and everything else in between. So that's one thing. Another is you can do exploratory studies, and that tends to go more into the quantitative. So if anybody here is doing quantitative, then that's a different kind of thing where probably you need to think of variables, you need to think of larger sample sizes, you need to think of different statistical analyses to explain a phenomenon. There is another category, which is community change. So you have studies where the community is going to be directly involved as part of this. So maybe your thesis is a thesis that you and your students you're going to write, but you're going to write sitting down and working closely with your students in making decisions about the design. Or this is a project that you're going to write, but you're going to write in consultation with the community members, with parents, with other teachers. That is going to help us understand community better. And that's when you talk about participatory action research, or YPAR, as in youth participatory action research. You can evaluate programs, you can evaluate policy, then you can do evaluative study, you can do another case study, or something that brings memories and relies on other ways to interrogate situations. And that's when you can use narrative inquiry, you can do ethnography, you can do ethnography, collective ethnography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are different. So whatever goal you have is gonna immediately, it's going to, so many of you, I imagine, are gonna go into exploratory or descriptive studies. And sometimes people think an exploratory study, no, that's not, or a descriptive study, no, that's not, that's too basic for a master's thesis. I'm like, oh no. Little do you know. No, just because it's exploratory, I mean, because sometimes we think of, I think about the exploration stage of research in the sense that you're learning, but an exploratory study is a whole different ballgame. And that is a really deep study that we need to conduct. Same with descriptive. Just describing what a problem or a social phenomenon looks like, that takes a lot of time. So it's important not to trivialize or think that exploratory or descriptive are like a lesser value than, oh, I'm gonna implement a reading comprehension technique, or I'm going to implement a writer thing. No, implementation is important, but sometimes in order to think of implementation, I need to make sure I understand the phenomenon clearly, or I understand the situation, or I understand the context, or I understand the reality. And that sometimes is the kind of study we have to start with first before we get into the other one. So that gives us 5 approaches to research. So first is quantitative. So when I do quantitative, my main idea is to prove if a theory is right or not. So that's why usually you say in terms of you pose a hypothesis that can be tenable or null. So it's 0 or 1, basically. It's binary. So either the hypothesis is tenable or it isn't. And do a lot of measurement. You tend to do a lot of statistical analysis. Sample sizes will be much larger. Or you can do qualitative studies that kind of try to go in deeper explorations and descriptions of social phenomena or educational phenomena. Sometimes you can do mixed methods. And mixed methods is when you carefully bring together elements of qualitative and quantitative studies. Mixed methods actually means you really are combining elements from both in the analysis. It's different, for example, from saying, I have a qualitative study that has a qualitative component. You can't do that. You can have a quantitative study, and then you get a smaller sample and you conduct interviews. But that doesn't mean it's mixed methods. You have to decide it's mixed methods from the beginning. And it means that you have a grasp of both the qualitative techniques and the qualitative instruments, and the quantitative techniques and instruments, and how they come together to help you interpret and help you find some and make conclusions. Very interesting. I know there are some people in Colombia who are already doing mixed methods research. Then you have arts-based, where you can use elements of creative arts. You can use music, you can use drawing, painting, to develop research based on artistic and aesthetic manifestations. So people who use art as a basis for writing or creative writing, that's an arts-based research project. And then you have community-based participatory research, which is when you have people from academia or schools working with people from communities, when you have like teachers working with community members in the neighborhoods, or you have like local, like indigenous people working with, and you mix it up, and it's grassroots in nature. It means the construction of the project cannot be the sole creation of the so-called, or let's say the qualitative expert or the research expert, but it has to be something that the community itself and the community themselves have to decide it's a project. Now, it's important here to always think about these terms and all the terms we use in research in general as umbrella terms, meaning there is not just one single way to do this, or there is not just one single way to, there's no one single way to understand ABR. There is no one single way to understand Qual. There is no one single way to understand Qual or Quant. There is no one single way to understand mixed methods. There is no one single way to define action research. There is no one single way to define case study. There is no one single way to talk about phenomenology. There is no one single way to talk about ethnography. There is no one single way to talk about critical discourse analysis. There is no single way to talk about meta-analysis and meta-synthesis. No. Those are umbrella terms that bring together different families of scholarship and schools of thought that help together build the idea. So wherever you want to go in that direction, you always have to understand that there's umbrella terms that are also associated with particular paradigms: post-positivist, feminist, critical, emancipatory, community. I mean, in chapter 1, they mentioned several of those. And it's important to recognize them, because whenever you say you're going to do a particular approach, that there is a history. There is a history and a historicity behind all the research approaches. If you start looking at the history of the approaches here, they all have influences. There are philosophical and epistemological and theoretical influences that have turned each of these into what it is today. If you start thinking about case study, if you start thinking about action research, start thinking about phenomenology, it's important as a researcher that you know the history of those and how that history has helped those move into language, into education, and how has helped them move into language education. And it's also important, not even if you have one author you really like, and you can choose authors, not to, to really have a broader, as you develop more and more comprehension of the particular topic or the particular approach or the particular technique or the particular methodology. Look at multiple authors who talk about it. Don't just stay with one single story. As Adichie always said, the danger of a single story. And sometimes in qualitative, in Qual and Quant, and I see that happening often. That you have people going, really staying with one author. And I see, for example, action research, and then people in ELT gravitate a lot to the work of Ann Burns. And it's not, and it's good. I mean, I'm not questioning the choice of going with Ann Burns. I'm questioning, don't base everything you know about action research on just Ann Burns, or just Wallace, or just David Noonan, but in general, just don't base anything in your life around David Noonan. Just saying that we can do better. But you get the idea. Don't just base on one author. I mean, like I said, yeah, I have some authors I like, and I like case study research. Yes, I say, yeah, my main author is Bob Stake. Yes, for multiple reasons. But I know, I mean, despite that, I know what Yin and Mariam have written about case study research. I know what Burns has written about action research, but I've also read the work of Bridget Somek, the late Sue Nofke, the work by Ken Zeichner in teacher education. I have Maureen Robinson in South Africa. So there are other authors. And I have looked at action research, the history of action research, for example, in relation to the civil rights movement, and the work of Miles Horton and the Highlander Center, and how the Highlander Center and action research influenced people like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. In case you didn't know that actually a lot of the things that Rosa Parks did were actually action research. Maybe you didn't know that, but now you know it, you learned it today. Ethnography, there are multiple authors who do ethnography. And it's important to look at them and construct your own version based on what you read. So, but look at the multiple authors who have written about this and create your own understanding of qualitative, action research, phenomenology, critical discourse analysis, virtual ethnography, digital ethnography, whichever way you want to go. Don't just stay with one author. Don't stay with one single story. Look at multiple authors and create your own understanding based on all those authors. In every language you can read. And usually sometimes there comes a point that we choose some authors we like better than others, and we use them, and those are the ones we suggest to our students to read, and those are the ones we keep reading. But it's important to know that there are multiple traditions, that these are umbrellas, more so than larger or like single story or one size fits all approaches to conducting research. So now we're going to talk a little bit about qualitative research. This first definition by Saldana, he first of all reminds us about the qualitative umbrella idea. And this, the goal of qualitative research is, and I'm going to use my annotation tools, because I love annotation tools. It's the idea of study natural social life. That we want to study this and understand the human experience. So there is a human and a humane dimension to conducting Qual. That it's very important to always keep in mind. That most of the research we do in qualitative studies involve people, or that it may affect people, even if you don't conceive it in the sense of that it involves people. And you collect multiple kinds of data sources. Now let's see the definition here. So this one by Creswell is this idea that we want to start looking for a problem, to formulate a question. This definition by Creswell is very technical in the sense of this is what you do. This is the process. Formulate a problem, decide on a question, collect your data, analyze your data, and then present your findings. And understanding that one of the reasons we conduct qualitative research is because sometimes we, as Flick says, sometimes we need to move past the traditional measurements or the traditional or the statistical interest, the traditional concern that we find in quantitative research, and start thinking about the exploration of social phenomena. One important thing here is I imagine most of your studies will very likely be inscribed in a qualitative research methodology. As you make the decisions of why this is qualitative, and then you can say later, oh, this is a case study, this is actual research, but understanding that those are inscribed in this larger paradigm that we call qualitative research. It's also important to interrogate why we do it. It's also very important to interrogate why we do qual. Interrogate why conduct qual. And interrogate why, this why conducting qual. And think about the reasons that people traditionally pose as answers. And I always remember some of the greatest hits. I like to conduct qual because there is no math. I get that all the time. Yeah, I want to do qualitative because there is no math. Just because, wait, first of all, no one said you could not use statistical data in a qualitative study. Nobody said we couldn't quantify things in a qualitative study. No, there is no. So the absence of math is no. Another one I get all the time. I'm doing qual because it's in a school. Like, okay, there is no correlation. There is no causality relation that says that school studies have to be qualitative. School study can be qualitative. School study can be mixed methods. A school study can use arts-based. School study can be community-based. So there is no, that leap. School means qualitative. No. You need to think bigger than that. No, it's because it's in the school. No, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything to me in saying, no, it's qualitative. It's because it's, no. I like to do qual because it's easier. Oh, boy. And that's when the people who do qual start laughing. We start laughing in conferences. Then we go to a qualitative inquiry conference and we start laughing. Oh, we do qual because it's easier. Who on earth told you that first of all, who on earth told you that doing research is easy? And second of all, who told you that qual is easier? Actually, doing qual and doing qual well could be more difficult. I mean, doing good qual research. And here is a very important word of caution. You're going to be doing something that is going to be like inscribed in some kind of a remix between what we call educational research, teacher research, and qualitative research. And they're different. Qualitative research there is educational research that is qualitative, just as there is educational research or pedagogical research that is quantitative. Just depends on the choice of topics and the field. Teacher research is because you're teachers, or it's because it's in classrooms. So it's you're gonna be somewhere and where you can say, it's qualitative research in educational settings. Yeah, fine. Or teacher research of qualitative nature, fine. So you're gonna be somewhere there. But whichever way you go, however you wanna frame it, the first condition that you always have to keep in mind is make sure you do it well. Make sure you do it well. And here's what I need to remind you of the historical significance of your existence in this plane of the multiverse, in this moment in time, in the time-space continuum, in this little speck in the multiverse and time-space continuum that is called the master's program in English teaching at Universidad de Córdoba. You are the first cohort. You are entrusted with setting the tone for this program. And I'm telling you this as a visiting scholar into this program. I'm not even telling you this as the people who are, you know, the caretakers, like Jose David, Sonia, and the others. No, I'm saying this as a visiting scholar who cares about this program and cares about this university because I have very good friends at this university. And someone who's deeply concerned, deeply invested in education and educational research in Colombia and education research in the Global South. You have to set the tone for the quality of the research in this program. You are the primary stakeholders of this program. And the reason this program is gonna sustain itself over time. If people see good research coming from this program, more students will want to come to this program. And more people will use this program as a focal point of reference. So do not take that responsibility light. Oh, sorry, just 1 second. Don't take this responsibility lightly. You are the primary stakeholders of this program. So whatever research you do, however big, however small, and I always like to use a quote, and I always do it when I teach research. I always like to use a quote from the movie Men in Black, the first movie Men in Black. And you remember the story, there is one scene where J and K are looking for Orion's belt. And then the pug, Frank, the pug he tells Agent J, just because it's small doesn't mean it's insignificant, or something like that. The line is kind of like that. Just because it's small doesn't mean it's insignificant. That in the universe, in the vastness of the universe, something small could have more meaning, more power, more content than something big. Your research is going to be small scale in nature and in scope and in expectation. But it's not small, it's not insignificant, and it has to be understood as part of a larger community of learning and a larger community of practice and a larger community of affinity. That's what people who do Qual understand. That, again, quoting that famous line from Gladiator, from General Maximo Decimus Meridius, what we do in life resonates in eternity. We do Qual because we want to contribute with local solutions to global problems, so we together can sum all the efforts and find bigger solutions. We understand that the whole is the sum of its parts, and that the sum of its parts make a stronger whole. Am I sounding too transcendental at this point? Probably, but that's part of the research endeavor. Understanding that you're not just conducting a tiny study, you're conducting a study that is small in scale, but should be well done. So other people can learn from it, and we can all together use all those little studies in that particular field to grow it, to make it grow, to let it grow, to help it grow. So always keep that in mind in the sense of why we do Qual. And understand the difference between Qual and Quant. So Qual and Quant, and I remember that I remember one of my when I took the class, we talked about this. That in quantitative studies, we go for something we call breadth. So we go for studies that are more overarching in nature. And that's why we use statistical data. And that's why we use larger samples. And that's why you have to keep in mind ideas like statistical power, which is the number, the size of the sample. That the larger the size of the sample, the lower the standard deviation is going to be, and that gives you more power in the statistical analysis to make the results more reliable. Any part of those things sounded really confusing, then you probably, when you still want to do quantitative studies, you need to read more. Now, my recommendation is, even if you're doing qualitative research, you should know how to read quantitative studies. So when we say qual versus quant, this is not necessarily, sorry, that these two are mutually exclusive or a binary opposition. No. We're going to see that qual and quant, they are related. We're going to show you a little chart later. Now, when we do qual, what we're going for depth. So when we do qual, we want to look at this as deeply as possible. And that's why we talk about this idea of trustworthiness. We talk about the idea of prolonged engagement. It means how long you're going to spend in the field doing that particular research. Hold on. I'm going to ask you to excuse me for 1 minute. I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be right back. I'm back, and once again, I'm so sorry. Yeah, mask and baby, yeah, she's waiting. Don't worry, baby. Don't forget the baby, the leashes on the floor. Sorry about that again. It's just that's life in the times of the pandemic. So as I was saying, qualitative, and I love the fact that this is going to be at the recording. This is hilarious. We go for depth. It means we talk about the idea of spending longer in the field, talking to more people, checking, make sure their voices are corroborated, that we call member checks, that we have multiple data sources to interpret multiple realities, which is what people call triangulation, a word that when you talk about analysis, it's important to look at it very carefully. Some people tend to misunderstand it. So that's the difference between qualitative and quantitative. They're not mutually exclusive. And you should not think about them as polar. No, there is no polarization. In educational and teacher research and social research, we need both qualitative and quantitative. We need people looking at the same phenomena quantitatively and qualitatively, so we can have multiple realities to better understand the phenomenon. Sometimes we need to have quantitative studies that give us clues about the kinds of qualitative studies we have to conduct. And sometimes we need to have qualitative studies to help us realize, oh, to understand this, now we need to look at this at a broader scale. So now it's not just one school, we need to look at the entire city. So it's not N equal 28. To understand this phenomenon, we have to look at every 10th grader in every school, in every part of area. And there we are. Hey, hey. Sorry. Hey. Hi, baby. Hi. Hi, Connor. Hi. Hi, my baby. Hi. And there they are. That was Connor. Very happy to see you. Yeah, but again, I don't mind about this part of the class because, again, when we do quality, when you do research, and I want to use this as part of this conversation, that there is a very human dimension to doing research. There is a very human and humane, but human dimension to doing research. And it's that you are, in many aspects, the engine that drives the decisions about the kinds of studies you conduct. Everything you are is going to comprise that study. Every dimension of your own self is going to be part of the study. Every element of your positionality shapes and reshapes your research. Whether you're single or you're married, that changes. Whether you have children or don't have children, whether you have pets and the pets are dogs or cats, that has an effect. Whether you're male or female, whether you're heterosexual or gay or lesbian or transgender, that has an effect on your research. And all those things are connected, basically what Kimberly Crenshaw calls intersectional. So all of the layers of your identity come to play in the design. So when you're thinking about your projects, you cannot simply think about the projects in the me as teacher dimension. That's only one dimension of you. You're more than, but you're not just a teacher. Even if you're, once a teacher, even if you're, that's not your job. It's a part of you, but it's not the only thing that defines you. Your sets of beliefs, your life experiences, your background, your place of birth, the way we think about some educational phenomena in Antioquia are different from the way we think about them in Córdoba or in the Caribbean region, as opposed to the coffee region. And that all the sum of those help us make a Colombian framework. So every layer of you, every aspect of you shapes your research. It's not the same doing research when you're single than when you get married. When you get married, your equation changes. And when you start adding all the other layers to your identity, that starts changing. So think about this idea of thinking of your project. You're not simply designing, it's not simply a chore it's much larger than that. And everything you are comes to play. And you have to let everything you are permeate your research project. And that's why I said I was very comfortable in the moment I just letting the class run and having Connor say hi, because part of my life is in relation of my relationship with my dogs and the relationship I am as a dog, as an animal rights advocate and as an animal rights, and that's all part of my work. I do not compartmentalize it when I do research. Everything I am, every dimension of my own self comes into play when I'm thinking about my projects. And every dimension of yourselves has to come into that. There is one section that translates that. And it's the section called Role of the Researcher. And that role of the researcher is simply answering what amounts to a very difficult question that some of you may think it's not, and occasionally I assign that as a homework assignment in my class. It's the question, who are you? Sometimes I say, I ask the class, I tell them, okay, the assignment is answer the question, who are you? And have the class look at me like I was having ganja. Like I was just hanging out with Bob Marley, having some really potent ganja, and I'm letting the ganja speak. Like, what do you mean? Who are you, Raúl? I know who I am. Do you? I know who I am. Like, do you know who you are? Do you really know who you are? And I'm really gonna leave that question dangling tonight. Who are you? And think about it. Do you know who you are? Have you considered every layer of who you are and how that layer of who you are is affecting the choices you made for that topic? Why did you choose that topic? That's the question I want you to think about as you think about this. Why did you choose that topic? I don't have it here. Why did you choose that topic? Like, I really want you to think about it. Why did you choose that topic? What got you there? What experiences, what situation, what life circumstances got you to the choice of the topic, the choice of topic? Because some of you haven't thought about that carefully. What got me to that topic? Some of you chose it maybe because I think it's cool. Yeah, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with coolness. There is nothing wrong with saying, oh, it's a cool topic. It's a hot topic. It's a very cool topic. Yes. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. Although I would really caution you about being careful of doing what I like to call, and you see it here in this chart, what I like to call hashtag research. I would strongly caution you against doing what I like to call hashtag research. I mean, you understand what I mean by hashtag research, right? The idea that the hashtag, as it appears on Twitter, on Facebook, or Instagram, that this is the way you can find trendy topics. Some people make choices about research because they're trendy. No, don't choose topics because they're trendy. Don't choose topics just because they're cool. No, think bigger than that. Don't choose topics because they're easy. No, choose topics or do research. And again, I love the pop culture references, but I always go with the quote by Dumbledore that you need to choose between what's right and what's easy. And that is important when you do research. When you do research, you have to make the choice between what's right and what's easy. Am I gonna choose the easy topic? I'm gonna choose the topic, the taquillero, as we say in Spanish, the ones that are taquillero. Am I choosing these topics so I can have a lot of people when I go to the conferences? I can have all the people going to my chat, going to my talk. What are you doing? Are you doing research or a TED talk? I mean, what are you doing? So no, because I mean, you have to think about this. Why did I choose that? Why did I choose that topic in the first place? Did I choose it because it was the right thing to do, or because that sounded really cool? Your professors, the ones who are doing research, are always wrestling with this. And most of us have chosen the road less traveled of we're gonna choose the topics that we think we need to research, not the ones people are talking about just because they're trendy. There are moments when you're gonna choose research topics that people may not pay a lot of attention to at first. But that's what we need to do. That's what we need to talk about, and eventually people will notice. So always keep in mind the choices you make and the rationale behind those topics. And research is a combination of brain and heart. This is how we design it, but this is how we do it. That's my take. This is how we design it. This is how we do it. Because because you're gonna spend 2 years of your life on this. Don't do something you're gonna end up hating after graduation. Don't choose topics you're not gonna end up hating. Choose topics that you feel you wanna do more after graduation. that you want to turn into professional development, that you want to turn into publications, that you want to turn into advocacy, that you want to turn into curriculum, but that you want to continue working long after you finish your research, your master's thesis. And that's why we make the choices of the research approaches we go for. Keeping in mind why we chose that. So really, as you go back and start writing the problems and go back and think, why am I doing that? And if you need to restructure the topic, that's what you have an advisor for. So they can help you restructure it, understanding that your topic is gonna change several times between now and the end of the second semester. Because research is dynamic, research is malleable. We change based on new information, based on new facts, we modify and we move things around. So this is what I was talking about, that qualitative and quantitative, they are not disconnected. And I love this old chart by Bob Stake, that Bob Stake showed that in one of his classes, in the case study class. How, when we look at this, both Qual and Quant, oh, no, not this one, maybe this one. For how we perceive educational phenomena and how both of them lead to generalizations. So that idea that, oh, you cannot generalize in Qual. That's something you hear all the time. No, you cannot generalize. Wait. What do you mean you cannot generalize? All research has to lead to some form of generalization. Otherwise, what is the point of writing a literature review? If you tell me, no, you cannot generalize from qualitative, and I'm going to ask you, then why is the point? Why do you even look at the literature? If your study is so particular, if every study is so unique, then we can never connect the studies. And it's important, I always talk about when I teach Introduction to Research. It's important to understand that just because the one thing is that you are conducting the study in your place, and but that you need to frame that context and that situation within a much larger global mindset. Otherwise, what we're doing is simply conducting very idiosyncratic studies. Your studies are not idiosyncratic. And I think what you mean by idiosyncratic means this only happens to you. Really? This only happens to you? Are you telling me that you have, that statistically, that the situation that you're dealing with in your class, that it's more likely that that someone could be hit by lightning, that a teacher could be struck by lightning, than dealing with a related situation to yours? That your situation is one, and let's say I always like to play with numbers. I say there are 7.5 billion people, and let's say 0.1% are, 0.01% are, and that's like 7.5 million. And let's say that's 0.1% of the population is teachers. So 7.5 million people. Are you telling me that that statistic, that all of your problems have a statistical probability of 1 in 7.5 million? Are you telling me like this? I mean, the chance of being struck by lightning is like 1 in 1 million or something like that. Being bitten by a shark is like 1 in 200,000. Are you telling me it's more likely for me to be bitten by a shark right now than having a similar problem to yours? The probability, the loss of probability got turned against you. Your problem is not that unique. No, your problem is situated in a very specific phenomenon, but it's not unique. You're not the only teacher dealing with reading comprehension. You're not the only teacher reading with proficiency. You're not the only teacher reading with language acquisition. You're not the only teacher thinking of brain development. You're just giving it a particular touch to develop a small piece of the bigger puzzle. Your study is a piece in a puzzle. And the piece is going to fit in the puzzle somehow. So always keep that in mind, that your studies, and that's why we talk about this idea of naturalistic generalization, in the sense that I can look at a study somebody conducted somewhere else, and I can draw some ideas to do something similar here. That's why we read literature. That's why we read the studies, to get inspiration for our research and our practice. Otherwise, what would be the point of conducting research if no one can learn from my experience? Wouldn't that be sad? I conducted a study, but no one can learn from this because I'm so unique. No, you are very unique in the sense of you're a carbon, in the sense of you're a carbon-based living organism with a particular DNA. But not even your DNA is that unique. Your DNA is the sum total of all of your ancestors. So it's not, even your DNA is not that unique. It's simply the product of multiple replications over hundreds of thousands of years. So when you start thinking of the problem you're going to pose, don't think of it as either I am so unlucky or I am so fortunate that this only happens to me. No. One variation of this phenomenon is what happens to you, but this phenomenon is much larger than you. This is much bigger than you. It always has. Again, I just remember that quote from Harry Potter. So always project the thought that you are doing something at small scale, but it has global or local implications. And that will help you situate your study better in the larger body of literature, and start helping you understand that you are making a small contribution to a larger field. Because that's exactly what you're doing. You're making a small contribution to a larger field. Again, but just because it's small, it doesn't mean it's insignificant. People who are doing top-down educational research need the smaller studies that you do in order to think about what else we need to do at the macro level. So it's all interconnected. All research should be interconnected. So now one little intermission. Just to read, and I love this quote by Gilbert Keith Chesterton, because this quote for me means a lot about what research is. When he could not follow the train of the reasonable, he coldly and carefully followed the train of the unreasonable. Instead of going to the right places, banks, police stations, rendezvous, he systematically went to the wrong places, knocked at every empty house, turned down every cul-de-sac, went up every lane blocked with rubbish, went round every crescent that led him uselessly out of the way. He defended this crazy course quite logically. He said that if one had a clue, this was the worst way. But if one had no clue at all, it was the best, because there was just a chance that any oddity that caught the eye of the pursuer might be the same that had caught the eye of the pursued. Somewhere a man must begin, and it had better be just where another man might stop. I like this particular quote from the Blue Cross by Chesterton, because this is the mind of the researcher. Don't get so fixated on that topic that you overlook what's around you. Don't simply focus on, oh, I need to search the literature in TESOL, that you forget that there is literature that helps TESOL, that is in applied linguistics, in social linguistics, in anthropology, in psychology, in sociology, in literacy, and that can help. When you're collecting your data and you do the field notes, then make sure you try to understand everything around you, because there are details in the surroundings that can help you understand the social phenomenon better. I mean, yes, have an idea in mind, but don't be so fixated that you develop tunnel vision. And when you start to think of a problem, sometimes the best way to start is by wondering about it. A little bit of wondering never hurts anyone. Now, it's important also to understand, back to qualitative, that this is more than just an approach or a method. That whether it's qualitative inquiry or case study or action research or ethnography, or there are some elements here. There are these 4 dimensions: the epistemological and the ontological about the nature of knowledge, the sense of appreciation and the values that we bring to the table, and how all these things become this instrumental dimension to qualitative inquiry. This instrumental is the data collection, the data analysis, the minutiae of the project. But that when you're thinking about qualitative, you have to think from here, from these layers, and how these layers help you translate that into the design, into the instruments, into the interviews. And that the road goes from here to here. That everything we do has to begin from here to here. Even in structural practices, you have to begin to think of them as epistemological, ontological, aesthetic, and axiological phenomena that become instruments, that become techniques, that become methodologies. Now, that leads us into this idea of the German idea of the Verstehen as deeper comprehension of social phenomena. So it means one of the goals of conducting studies that are qualitative in nature is that deeper comprehension of the social. How we need to look at life experience, we need to look at studies, we need to look at words, we need to look at everything that's happening, and how that together develops that comprehension. So one of the goals of conducting qualitative research is going deeply into the phenomenon. When you think about a topic, you have to think how deep I should go to understand it. That is not surface level, it's deep. And that's why sometimes it's better to start with a small question that you can devote more time to understand it better, that with a slightly broader question that you're not going to be able to really understand deeply. This deep comprehension also has to do with who you are. And again, when I always talk about the who you are, it also involves who you are at this present time. Hold on 1 second. Puppy. No. Life. And I always like to think about this idea, like, who are you right now? And that who are you right now also involves your skills, your skill set. Sometimes you pose questions that are so broad that you may not be able to answer them in 1 year, or topics that are so big in scope that you don't have, at this point in time in your life, you don't have all the training to answer that question. So sometimes there are students who pose master's level questions that I look at them and I say, no, that's a dissertation topic. That is too big for a master's thesis. So we tell you, scale it down. And sometimes we have to, you're gonna hear this often. No, your question is too broad. You're gonna hear that a lot. No, that question is too broad. Or that question is too narrow. Sometimes you're like, oh no, the question is too big. And I'm like, I look at you, sometimes you, your advisors, or in my case, I'll look at that question, I'll say, that question is too big. You need to scale it down. You need to organize it. Not because you are not good at it, but because, puppy. So as I was saying, you have to always think about who are you right now, and think about the resources you have available at this moment in time. Sometimes people project, they post research topics that are like, okay, I can say that, no, that's a longitudinal study. You don't have 4 years to answer that question. You only have 2 semesters. You only have 2 semesters. So you have to think about that. I always like to use the same quote. You want to build a plane you can fly and land. That's a quote I always use when I talk about research, because I gave a talk a few years ago about that. You want to build a plane you can fly and land. Land being the key part. Because the landing is always the most difficult part of a flight. And you have to be honest about where you are in this point. Your study can be ambitious, but it has to be ambitious based on the reality. What kind of plane can you fly? Do you have the skills and the expertise to say, I'm gonna fly an A380, an Airbus A380, you know, that big one with the 2 stick, that is basically 2 stories, is a double-decker plane. No, if you don't have the experience, you're gonna crash that plane. No one starts learning to fly on a big plane. They start on a small plane, only one engine, those tiny little Cessnas, and they move to 2 engines, and they move to Jetstream, and then finally they start moving into the Airbuses and the Boeings of the world. Start with a small plane. Start with a project you can really develop and finish well. And keep it honest. What resources do you have to carry out your project? How much knowledge you have about that particular subject area and about qualitative research methods and analysis to go bigger and smaller. Always keep that in mind. Again, being honest that just because it's small, it doesn't mean it's less meaningful or it's going to be less impactful. The impact of your work is going to be on how it helps, or how it changes people, and how it helps people, and how it benefits people, whether it's your classroom or the entire school. If you can use the research to change and improve the practices in your classroom and improve the learning conditions of your students, that is a very well crafted study. And it's the one we need right now. But always think about the resources you have, the skills you have, because again, being ambitious, it's important. Your research has to be ambitious, but that ambition has to be grounded in your reality, in the time you have, in the resources you have, in the access to sites you have, in the access to participants you have, in your own knowledge of the field, of the city, of the school, of the curriculum. Keep all those things in mind, and that will help you develop this deeper comprehension of the phenomenon from your reality. Develop that verstehen. And understanding that research is grounded in all levels of society. So there is a macro dimension to qualitative inquiry that is the historical political. All social and educational phenomena has a history, have a past. And all of your research has implications for the future. That's what we talk about the political. Research is political, not in the sense of proselytizing, but research is political in the same way education is political. You want to change the conditions, and you want to look at the conditions a different way. When I want to study the conditions to improve them, that's a political act. So research is always political. Again, and I like the word, it's political. Doesn't mean it's partisan. It doesn't mean it belongs to a political party. It means it has the objective of changing the conditions of society. So research is always political. And I think in the words of Gloria Latson Billings, it's political, doesn't have to be partisan. It's just you want to change things for the better. So that makes it political. Freire always talked about how education is a political act, because we want to change the conditions. We don't want the conditions to remain exactly the same. We want to make them better. That desire to improve things, it's what you call a political act. Wanting to have things remain the same, that's another political act. But we want our classes to be better. We want our students to learn better. We want the curriculum to be more effective. That's all a political act. That is ingrained in a social cultural setting because your research is sociocultural in nature. Your research is going to look very carefully at a particular set of societal conditions in your cities, in Córdoba, or whatever else, because I mentioned you may not be coming from other departments. Maybe you're coming from Barranquilla or coming from Sucre or whatever. And that changes everything. So it's sociocultural. Even though we can have similar problems in terms of like communicative competence or content-based learning, some of the specific sociocultural circumstances in Antioquia make the projects different from the sociocultural conditions that happen in Córdoba. And we always have to factor that in. And then at the micro, because again, it's qualitative inquiry. Qualitative inquiry is social science research. There is one dimension that grounds it in schools, which is the pedagogical. So this is research we do in schools or in educational settings. Doesn't have to be a school. It can be a language center. It could be a learning community. It could be a community center, a community center. It could be anything that has to do with learning and teaching and education. Understanding that education is much larger than teaching. So that pedagogical dimension is what grounds it into, oh, we are educators. A second intermission, just a little Calvin and Hobbes. So just I'll give you some time to read and smile. I always love that title, that this idea that writing, it's this obscure, and I like that because that's actually, and some people misunderstand that about this idea of being an academic. And that's why some people are so afraid of research, or people don't like to do research, or people feel they can't do research. Because sometimes in research, there is this, I like to always use the word esoteric, that some people think of research that is really esoteric thing, that only the Illuminati can do, or research is what the research groups in MinCiencias do. No. That's one kind of research. And one of the ideas in taking a course like this, it's that you begin to understand what doing research really is and really looks like. And that you understand that doing research is something that should be and is accessible to you as teachers. And it's accessible to your students. And it's accessible to the communities you serve. That there is one level of the macro institutionalized research that we do, but that even that research is grounded in reality, in the reality we live every day. A lot of educational research at all levels, there is a lot of just looking at classrooms and looking at what happens in classrooms and simply collecting data around it. I go regularly to the American Educational Research Association conference, ARA, the biggest conference in the world. and you go to a lot of presentations that are qualitative research, and you hear a lot of people beginning the presentation like, yeah, this is something I did in my classroom. Like that, like, yeah, this is something I did with my students in 10th grade. Wait, you got these, so you're telling me you got these professors at these universities saying, oh, I just did this with a group of teenagers in a class. Yes, yes, because that's part of doing research. It's not necessarily thinking of these super abstract things. A lot of the research you need to do is looking at your experiences, systematize them through a process of data collection and analysis and writing it and sharing it with the world. That's what research needs to be. It's how you take your experiences, your life experiences in the class, and you just look at them as a researcher. It means you are going to systematically collect data, analyze the data, and write about it. And a lot of the things you do as teachers are already part of that. All of you are constantly looking at your students, trying to understand their behaviors. That is just called observations. You are constantly taking a lot of notes about what your students do in class and using those notes to improve your practice. That is just called field notes. That is just called ethnographic field notes. You meet with parents and you strategically ask parents some questions so you can understand your students better and teach better for them. That is just called qualitative interviewing. You already use colors and crayons and markers to, and you have a planner and you put different colors to organize classes, lesson plans, meetings, comunidad académica, jornada pedagógica. That's called color coding. A lot of the things you already do as teachers, you can translate, those are transferable skills to become a qualitative researcher. What we do in a master's program or what you do in a doctoral program is simply add more theory to support those practices. We just simply add more reading to those practices to refine them and make it more sophisticated in the sense that you can do it more efficiently. But a lot of the skills you already have, they're gonna come in handy. Just need to change the mindset. And instead of doing this as a teacher, you need to think as a researcher. It just means looking at things from a different angle. But you can do exactly the same things. You already have skills in note-taking, in talking to students, in talking to parents, in talking to other teachers that are gonna become handy in your research endeavors. So don't think about research as something, again, I use the word esoteric, as something so esoteric that you need to be one of the Illuminati or join the Avengers in order to do it. No. Let's think of research as a more down to earth. Maybe you want to call it lower R, lowercase r research. More local brands of research. And we need those two. And those are the ones you can do. Those are the ones you should do. And that can lead into conference papers, and that can lead into publications, and that can lead into other kinds of research reports and things that we need to tell the world about. But I really like this cartoon, like the Calvin and Hobbes cartoon, because one of the things I don't want you to do is this: to be obscure, to be obtuse, to be obscure, to be abstract, to be obfusc. I mean, that you have to obfuscate your thoughts in order to sound academic, whatever that means. Yeah, so I really want to make sure when I make the argument, I sound very formal and very academic, and then you just grab the cup with your pinky like this. You drink it very stylishly. And then you start using all these big words, all those big authors all the time. Like, oh, come on, guys, seriously, give me a break. Give me a break. No. Be yourselves. As the quote says, be yourselves, unless you can be Batman. In that case, be Batman, but that's a different story. Be yourselves. When you write your research, be yourselves. Present it as yourselves. Don't try to be someone else. Embody and live your research. Embody and live yourself as a researcher. Don't worry if you don't sound very formal and elegant in the way you talk. Dude, don't forget about that. A lot of us in academia are moving away from that because a lot of us were trained in that huffing and puffing, in that posturing. I left that when I was in grad school, and I got tired of it. I got tired of going to conferences where people are always pretending to be like so smart and so articulate. Like, dude, you're just a duck in the pond. And we realized later, everybody's, I mean, those people are just what you call a duck in the pond. Really calm in the front, but you look at the legs and they're always moving. Like really cool, really relaxed, and inside they're a mess. No, be yourself. Be yourself. Do the research and live the research as you. Who are you? Goes back to that question. Who are you? Tailor your research style to you, using the theory, using the methods, using the readings to tailor that, to make that you. I'm not telling you, I mean, that's what I'm saying. No, I'm not going to tell you. I can share with you how I do my research, but not as a way, oh, this is the way you want to do it. No, I'm going to tell you, this is the way I do it, and I fit that to my style. I fit my research to my hair. I fit the research to my japas. I fit research to my scarves, and I fit this all to my personality, and that's how I conduct research. I am myself when I do the research, and I again, I really hate that posturing, that I have to really sound smart and I have to use the big words in order to sound more academic, like whatever that means. I mean, seriously, knock it off. No, because that doesn't make any sense. And that posturing that sometimes people have in the so-called ivory tower is what makes it, what scares you from doing the research. Because that's what happens. Sometimes we have this elevated discourse that scares teachers. That makes you think you are incapable of doing research. And that's when I have to say, no, you cannot come and tell you. I have to tell you the contrary, is you are super capable of doing research. Good research, quality research, impact research, world-class research. Otherwise, what am I doing here? You are capable of doing that kind of research, but you have to do it well. You have to be systematic. You have to be organized. You have to be rigorous because there are some conditions. There are some rules to play the game. You all can learn to play the game, but there are some conditions. There is good research and there is crappy research. And there are some conditions for good research, and crappy research is the one that does not follow those conditions. Crappy research is the one that you do in a hurry. You want to do something in a hurry, make a scrambled egg. That's something you can do in a hurry. Yeah, you want to do something quick, want to do something real quick, make a scrambled egg. It's really easy. You get an egg, you break the egg, you throw it in the skillet, you grab a spoon, you do it, you eat it, go home. That's easy, that's fast, scrambled egg. And even a scrambled egg needs a technique in order to actually be tasty. Good research has some conditions. It's systematic. It means you can show me that you have the data and you collected it and you analyzed it. It's rigorous. You can show me that you spend time reading through it and making notes and making more notes and putting those notes together into something. It's grounded in a tradition. It's grounded in a conceptual tradition. There are procedures. There are steps. And your thesis is going to show me all those steps. Your thesis is going to tell us a story. The story of how you came to this idea, how you put it together, what you discovered, and what that means for all of us, which is the last chapter of your thesis, which is the implications. What does this study mean for the larger community? What does this study mean for your master's program? What does this study mean for your teaching for licenciaturas? What does this study mean for the Ministry of Education? What does this study mean for professional development? You need to talk about that too. Again, you have to keep certain rules in terms of the presentation, but don't stop being you. Just because you wear a cocktail dress or you wear a formal suit, you don't stop being you. You are still you. Whether you wear a t-shirt, whether you wear a guayabera, whether you wear licky, or whether you wear a tuxedo, you are you. You don't wear a tuxedo and become James Bond. No, you're still you. Oh, that would be pretty cool, but that's a different story. No, you wear a tuxedo and you're still you. You wear a formal dress and you're still you. You fix your hair and you're still you. You wear your hair in a ponytail and you're still you. You are simply, for the thesis is your research in a tuxedo, but it's still you in a tuxedo. You don't stop being you just because you put on a tuxedo or because you put on a formal dress. No, you're still you. And I want you to keep that in mind. There are things we can negotiate when we do research. The format, the presentation of the findings, the kind of language, the format, the APA style, that we can negotiate it. And sometimes you have to make concessions. The thesis has a format. Now, can I break the format? Yes, but you have to be very, very strategic on how you break it. Is there room for that? Is that the moment? Yes, you can, and you can break it. And I really hope that at some point we start having theses that you actually make them as a movie, or someone in Colombia starts writing a thesis that is actually a musical in like a CD format. And there are examples of people who have already written dissertations as rap albums, or that you want to make your thesis as an art installation in a gallery. And we have examples in the world and in Colombia of people who have written theses and dissertations as art exhibits. But regardless of the format, whether you do it as a normal paper, whether you do it in an alternative format, whether you write it as a comic, are things that you have to negotiate. The one thing you should never negotiate is you. You should still be part of it. You should still be you in the middle of the format. Your voice should be recognized. Because at the end of the day, when people look at your work, they want to hear your voice represented in what you show. And they want to feel that when I read your thesis, when I read your work, I can see Heider, and I can see Jamie, and I can see Cindy, and I can see Kayla, and I can see Sael, and I can see Clara, and I can see Paul, and I can see Liz, and I can see everybody else. I don't want to see you disappear in your thesis. It means I want to see you. I mean, it means you have to also balance not hiding the participants. It's knowing when I let the participants speak for themselves and when I speak for them, or when I speak about them. Always finding that moment. And when you find that balance, and you are going to be there, because you wrote this. It's your work. You shouldn't be hiding in your work. That's why a lot of the work these days in qualitative research tends to favor first person. You did the work, show it. Don't lose yourselves. Don't lose your identity. Don't lose your essence just because you're doing research. No, don't lose your essence. We need to see that essence in your work. And the more true you are to yourselves when you do the work, the more interesting it's going to be. The more powerful it's going to be. Because sometimes students think that I need to stop sounding like me, I need to sound more formal, more academic. Like, I don't know what that means. Sounding academic means I have to write this according to APA 7, and I have to keep certain conventions in organization of structure of the chapters and the paragraphs. Fine. But look, when you read the papers, when you read the literature, look at how those people you like, look at how they write. And look at how you write, look at one author, and you can see that person reflected in the work. I mean, the real good scholars are people who can keep themselves honest in the work they write. And they're not faking it. Oh, we can tell when someone is faking it as a writer. Don't fake it, be you. Be true to yourselves. So we're just about to wrap up, and then we're gonna have some time for you to start writing things and having conversation before we dismiss for the night. Here are some characteristics of qualitative research, and this is on the from chapter 1 by Stake. So the first characteristic of qualitative research is that it's interpretive. It means that you have to keep in mind that in a social phenomenon, there are multiple realities. Those of the participants and those of you, and those of the social phenomenon, those of the community. And you have to try to capture those realities as much as possible. There's a technical word for that. There's a technical word that we tend to use in qualitative research. It's called the Rashomon effect. So sometimes we talk about these multiple meanings and we use this term. It means the recognition of the multiple realities in a phenomenon. That the Rashomon effect, the word Rashomon, it comes from the movie by Kurosawa, the movie Rashomon from the 1950s. It's experiential. It means I want to keep in mind that research is naturalistic. It happens, that research happens in the place where it happens. If I want to understand reading comprehension in a 10th grade classroom, I have to go to a 10th grade classroom and look at 10th graders doing that. If I want to understand how a group of adults practice English in a neighborhood, I have to go to the neighborhood and listen to the adults. If I want to look at the implementation of CLIL, I need to look at what people are playing with that. And then there is this idea of the vicarious experience. The idea of vicarious experience basically means when you present the data, the descriptions that you share have to be so vivid that I feel I was there. When you say you lived, you say vicariously, it means I lived them through the eyes of another. You say, for example, that people live life vicariously. So, like, for example, when you have a friend who's on a trip, think about, like, for example, I have a good friend or one of your family members goes on a trip, and they start posting all the pictures. And sometimes you tell someone, "Oh my God, I feel like I was there with you." So sometimes you see someone on vacation and they post so many pictures, you go like, "Oh my God, thank you for that. I felt like I was with you." I felt like I was with you is what I call the vicarious experience. So when I read your research, I want to feel like I was observing the class. I want to feel like I was the one interviewing the participants. I want to feel like the participants. So it means you're going to evoke more emotions that I can really understand the social phenomenon at hand. That's what we mean by vicarious experience. It's situational. I mean, it's in a context. You want to look at the big picture, but at the same time, you want to provide as many details as possible. And qualitative research is personalistic. You need to look at multiple points of view. The emic and the etic, the inside and the outsider perspective, how you negotiate the outside and insider perspective in a research phenomenon. And you are part of the research. You are an instrument of your research. You are not detached from your research. So that's what I keep saying. Your choices, the choices you make about your research topics are directly related to who you are directly related to what you do. You didn't make those choices by accident. You didn't make those choices because you had no other choice. And if that's the reason you made it, then you need to revisit your choices because that is not the right choice. Why did you do this? Why are you interested in that topic? Is that a topic that makes you vibrate? I'm not saying you have to change your topics entirely. No, I'm saying is go back and now that you began the program and you have the possibility to rethink a little bit, is that a topic that makes me vibrate? Is that a topic that makes me feel that when you're doing the research, you feel you're alive? If you're doing research and it feels like you're doing a chore, something is not working. If you get as much pleasure in doing research as you do sweeping the floor, I don't know. I mean, I do it, but I'm not gonna say. I mean, although I love doing dishes, different story. But like, yeah, I mean, I sweep the floor, and I don't get like, oh my god, I can't wait to do it. No, I do it because I have. I mean, the place is a mess, and sometimes we have to do it. And sometimes in research, you have to sweep the floor to actually have room for more stuff. But if you don't feel excitement about doing your research, you need to start rethinking the topic. If you don't feel there is a part of you that is reflected in your choice, you need to reassess your topic. If you don't see yourself, you don't see yourselves in that topic, you need to reassess your topic. You need to reassess the question. You need to reassess what you want to do. Again, why? Because you're spending 2 years of your life doing this. Because the thesis itself has an emotional toll on people around you. This is an experience that is going to involve your family. This is an experience that is going to involve your husbands and wives, for those of you who are married. It's an experience that is going to involve your boyfriend or your girlfriend if you have a partner. It's something that is going to involve your children, whether they're little babies or they're grown-ups. Somehow they're going to be involved in this because it's 2 years of your life. It's 2 years of your life where you, right now, you are here listening to me babble about research instead of playing with your child. And your child is wondering, why are you listening to that crazy guy with that hair, with that ugly hairstyle? And if they ask that question, is a very valid question, especially the question of what is wrong with his hair. I mean, that's a question I can understand. Your child might be asking, looking at me in the camera like, who is that guy? Who is that weird guy talking about with the headphones? Why are you listening to him when you play with me? And you're gonna have to explain to you that guy is just a really weird guy who knows something about research. But that is part of this, is that your family are part of this journey. I cannot conceive the Research Act without thinking of your inner circle and your surroundings, because they have a role, just as your thesis director is gonna have a big role to play. Just like your research methods professors are gonna have a big role to play. So will your family. They have an important role to play in this whole movie. No, they cannot help you with the conceptual framework. No, they cannot help you with the data analysis. No, they cannot help you with the findings. But you're gonna need them for emotion. You're gonna need them to feel you're still alive. And they're gonna need to remember that you're still there for them. So you're gonna need them. You're gonna need those of you, you're gonna need your husbands and your wives to bring you coffee. You're gonna need your husbands and your wives, and you have children, to kind of like what we do here, that we have to be on puppy duty when one of us is teaching. They're gonna have to be there in those moments when you feel like you're tired and the pandemic is getting the best of you, and why am I doing this again? Remind me again, why did I sign up for this, masters? That's when your family is gonna come into your rescue. And you are gonna be there for them too. Because you know that saying that it takes a village to raise a child? You may have heard that expression before. It takes a village to raise a child. Oh, it is true. You are that child. You're gonna need your village. The good news is, now I'm part of the village, so I'm here to help too. That's the good news. I'm part of the village now, and I'm gonna help. But, and understand that there are moments that your family cannot help you. That's why you have us, your professors, and that's why you have each other. I always say this: you're a cohort, you're a community, you're a comunidad, as my friend Tracy Flores always says. You're a comunidad. You're gonna need this comunidad before everything is said and done, because there comes a point that these are the only people who are gonna understand you. Your family, there will be a point in this journey that your family won't understand. That your family won't understand why you get so irritable when someone asks you, so what's your thesis about? And you're like, and you get like a cat. Or when are you graduating? Ah! And you lose it when you ask you that question. But your compadres right here are gonna understand. Your professors who survived are going to understand. So you need this community, but you need a community around. Because, as I told one student once, if the price we have to pay for your thesis is a broken family, then we failed. And I'm very clear about that. If the price we have to pay for your thesis is that your family is broken, this program failed you. I, as your first methods professor, failed you. And for me, failure is not an option. For me, failure is not an option. You have to graduate, and your family should be there to celebrate that moment. Because it's their moment. Now, they didn't write the thesis, but they were there to keep you grounded and honest and happy when you need it most. So you'll have, when you finish your thesis and you defend, you're gonna have to give your family a reward, a big, handsome reward, because they deserve it. And trust me, we need people around. Even, and I always tell another story I always tell because it's a true story. I always tell the story in my dissertation. And my mom, when I was in the States working on my dissertation at the University of Illinois, once we're on the phone, and she asked me the question, son, how can I help? How can I help you? My mom asked. And I just told her right there and then, keep praying, mom. Just keep praying. Keep praying so I don't lose it. Everything else is between me, my advisor, and my committee. You keep that veladora on. Keep that veladora you have for me. Keep it lighting. Keep it lit, because I need it. Just pray. Pray for my health, pray for my mental health, pray for my sanity, and you are helping a lot. So if your parents ask you that question at some point, or your spouses ask you that question, you can tell them that, oh yeah, Professor Mora said just pray. And that's a good help. That helps a lot. Don't discount the power of prayer in a moment like this. Don't discount prayers. Don't discount the good vibes and the positive energy. You need that too. And know that there could be a point that they cannot help you, but that's where you got advisors, you got professors, you got each other. Because this is all part of this. At the end of the day, we are all in this together. And you as a cohort need to take care of each other. Because that's what research really is. It's not just doing or analyzing data, it's how we do that in relation to this world. Is that the idea, yeah, in many ways is the idea of Ubuntu. We're all in this together. And we need to think about research in that sense, in the sense of building community. That we do research, yes, that one of the things we do with research is we write articles. Yes, I am not denying that. That one thing we do with research is we do conference presentations. Yes, that's part of that. But that is not the only reason we do research. We do research to improve things around us. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of mercenaries who write papers for money. I don't want you to be mercenaries writing papers for money. I don't want you to be mercenaries just obsessed with the Google Scholar H and I indices. At the end of the day, who cares about those indices? I mean, well, some people do, but the bigger picture is, who cares? Who cares if people cite you? And if you're going to become a scholar, don't be obsessed with citations. Don't worry about who cites you. Don't write work so people cite it. Write work so people read it. And you will notice you will notice the difference between writing for citations and writing to be read, because people will tell you when they read. And you will notice when they cite, because you can put alarms on Google Scholar. But when you write and people read you, it's because you're being honest. Keep your research honest. That is the best thing you can do. Keep it honest. When I say keep it humble, keep it humble. Keep it hungry, but keep it honest. Now, just last slide, and then we're gonna go into a nice conversation about all this and ideas. And these are some of the researchers, some of the approaches we have for qualitative research. One that we can do is this idea of participatory actual research. And if you choose to go in this direction, do not forget this word. Sometimes I worry, and I was having that was a lunch conversation I was having with Paulina today. I worry a lot that people forget that actual research is participatory. People have to participate in the act of research. So one option is participatory action research. Another option is narrative inquiry, looking at life histories in the surroundings. Case study, as looking at phenomenon, trying to understand phenomena by looking at people affected by the phenomenon. Grounded theory, quite difficult to do. So handle with care. Doing this well, it's tricky. But it's the idea that I use the data to create theory, to theorize. Phenomenology, this idea of interpretation. Ethnography, or ethnography, do ethnography. This idea of ethnography as looking at the field, but all I do ethnography is how I talk to others in relation to myself. We'll return to this one at the end of the course, because this is one of the options. Because this is one of the options I think you can explore in light of the lack of fieldwork. That maybe you turn the fieldwork into looking at yourself or looking at the people around you. There is qualitative interviewing, life history, testimonial, as ways of talking to people, some of them grounded in indigenous approaches, indigenous epistemologies. And then there's work that is grounded in critical theories, feminist theories, in Black feminist epistemologies. So these are other options you can explore. So when I think about qualitative research, you have a lot of possibilities to understand social phenomena. There isn't just one way to do qualitative research. There are many ways, and what we do is we look at the different people who have done it and the different traditions, and we start playing with that. We start having a bit of fun with that. So we're gonna stop here.